Welcome, listeners, to another StockExplorers Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're looking at Zevra Therapeutics, that's ZVRA. They're a biopharma company, really focused on rare diseases, places where treatments are pretty thin on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. Their whole mission is basically finding therapies for people with these really tough conditions.
So what we want to do today is get under the hood, understand Zevra's business, especially, for anyone thinking about this as an investment.
Right. We'll hit the recent news, look at the good and the bad, and try to figure out what might be coming down the pike for them.
Okay, let's dive straight in then. Q1 2025 financials. Big headline number. $20.4 million in revenue. Now, compare that to Q1 last year. It was just $3.4 million. That's a massive jump.
It really is. Q1 25 feels like a kind of inflection point for them operationally. And the big driver, no surprise, is the U.S. launch of MIPLYFFA.
Ah, yes, for Niemann-Pick Type C NPC.
That's the one. It pulled in $17.1 million of that $20.4 million total. So, yeah, huge impact right out of the gate.
Shows there's definitely demand, right? Strong start.
Definitely. It tells you their focus on these unmet needs, it's paying off initially.
And MIPLYFFA is the first FDA-approved drug for NPC, isn't it? We'll get more into that specific drug in a bit, but yeah, clearly making waves. What else stood out in the Q1 report?
Well, the net loss looked a lot better, too. It was down to $3.1 million, or negative 0.06 cents per share.
Okay.
Which is way down from Q1 24 when they lost $16.6 million, or about 40 cents a share.
So getting closer to break even, what helped there?
Yeah, progress, definitely. Part of it was they spent less on R&D. They finished up the phase 2 trial for KP1077, so that spending naturally decreased a bit.
Makes sense. Lower spending, much higher revenue. That's a combination investors like to see.
Absolutely. It's a healthier picture.
Now, there was also something about a Priority Review Voucher, a PRV.
Yes, right. That happened just after Q1 ended, in April. They sold a rare pediatric disease PRV.
And that brought in?
A lot. $150 million gross, about $148.3 million net. And the key thing here is it's non-dilutive cash. So they didn't have to issue more stock to get it.
Exactly. And that cash extends their runway. They're now saying out into 2029. That's a huge cushion.
Wow, 2029. That provides a lot of breathing room. What are they planning to do with all that money?
They've been clear it's mainly to back the commercial launches. So more support for MIPLYFFA and also for OLPRUVA, their other drug.
Okay.
And then also to push forward the big phase 3 trial, the Discover trial for Celiprolol. That's for VEDS, vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Got it. So focusing fire on the commercial products and the most advanced pipeline asset sounds logical. How did Wall Street take all this news, the analysts?
Oh, they liked it. The market reaction was pretty positive. That $20.4 million revenue blew past the consensus estimates, which were hovering more around like $16 to $17 million.
Okay.
And the loss per share, that negative 6 cents, was much better than the negative 19 to 24 cents people were expecting.
So a solid beat on both top and bottom lines.
Yep. And the stock price reflected that afterwards. All right, so good momentum financially, powered by MIPLYFFA, and then this big cash boost from the PRV. Let's dig into MIPLYFFA itself a bit more. What's the story there?
Okay, so MIPLYFFA, the drug name is arimoclomol. As you said, first FDA approval for NPC. That happened September 2024, and they launched it commercially in the U.S. late November 24.
Pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah. And their big goal is to make this the sort of go-to treatment for NPC globally. It's a really rare genetic thing.
Right.
And importantly, the U.S. patients who were getting it early through an expanded access program or EAP, they've all been switched over to the commercial drug now. That EAP is closed.
How's the uptake been since the launch? You said it drove revenue, so it must be decent.
It looks pretty strong, yeah. By the end of March, so end of Q1, they had 122 prescription enrollment forms. 13 of those came in just in Q1.
And how does that compare to the total patient population?
They estimate that's about a third, maybe slightly more, of the diagnosed NPC patients in the U.S., which, for just a few months on the market is quite good penetration.
That is impressive for a rare disease launch. What about getting insurance to cover it? That's always a hurdle.
True. They reported 38% of covered lives in the U.S. by the end of Q1, so making decent progress there, too.
Okay. Now, the price tag.
Yep.
Rare disease drugs are, known for being expensive. What are we talking about for MIPLYFFA?
Yeah, they're not cheap. The list price, the WAC, it ranges. Depending on the dose, it's somewhere between $40,000 and about $106,000 a month.
Per month. Wow.
Per month. So annually, you're looking at anywhere from $600,000 to maybe $1.3 million per patient.
Goodness.
Based on what they saw in the EAP, they think the average monthly price will probably land around $85,000.
That's substantial.
Yeah.
Really highlights the economics of this space. How does it actually work biologically? Briefly.
Sure. It basically helps the body's cells clear out the gunk that builds up in NPC. It boosts the natural recycling system within the cell, particularly helping get rid of the cholesterol that accumulates. It increases the activity of things called TFE and TFE3.
Okay, helps the cell clean house, essentially.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
What about Europe? Any plans across the pond?
Yes, definitely. They're targeting filing the marketing authorization application, the MAA, with the European Medicines Agency, the EMA, sometime in the second half of this year, 2025.
Oh.
It already has orphan drug status in the EU, which helps. It's worth remembering a previous application for this drug by the company Zevra bought was actually withdrawn a while back. So Zevra's navigating that history.
Right, so maybe learning from past attempts. Okay, MIPLYFFA, clearly the star right now.
Like,
but they also have OLPRUVA for Urea Cycle Disorders, UCDs. How's that one doing?
OLPRUVA, yes, sodium phenylbutyrate. They started pushing that commercially in late January 24 after they picked it up from Zevra Therapeutics.
Right.
In Q1 this year, they got 5 new patient forms. That brings the total to 28 since it first launched back in mid-2023. Market access looks good, actually 78% covered lives by end of Q1.
78% coverage, but only 28 patients total. Does the revenue match that access?
Well, that's the tricky part. The revenue is still really low. Just $0.1 million net in Q1, same as Q4 last year.
$100,000. That does seem low given the access and, well, the likely price of a UCD drug.
It does. And adding to that picture, they had to take some pretty big inventory write-offs for OLP or UVA last year, like $5.7 million in total. That suggests they're having trouble actually selling the drug they have on hand.
Yeah, inventory write-offs are never a good sign.
Yeah.
Are they changing their approach for OLP or UVA?
They say they are. They've refined the strategy. Now they're really focusing on adult UCD patients who are more active, trying to highlight OLP or UVA's portability as a big plus for them.
Okay. Niche targeting, any sign that's working.
Well, interestingly, they said all 5 of the new patients in Q1 fit that specific profile. So maybe. It's still very early days for that refined strategy, though.
And the pricing on OLP or UVA, is it similar to MIPLYFFA?
It's complicated. There are different versions. Like a 2-gram packet kit is listed at $190 LUAC, but then there's mention of another 2-gram kit costing maybe $17,000. That must be a much larger supply. Right.
A specific dose example given was a 6.67-gram dose, 270 units, listed at over $60,000. So the individual doses can be pricey, but it depends on the regimen. Still, that $0.1 million in revenue is the bottom line right now.
It seems like they're still trying to figure out the puzzle with OLPRUVA. Didn't they also start some kind of awareness campaign?
They did, yeah. The Check Ammonia campaign. They're working with the National Urea Cycle Disorders Foundation on that, trying to get doctors and patients thinking about testing ammonia levels more readily.
To find more UCD patients overall.
Exactly. Boost diagnosis rates, potentially widen the pool for OLPRUVA. Makes sense strategically.
Okay, let's shift gears to the pipeline. KP1077 for rare sleep disorders. You mentioned the phase 2 trial finish. How did that look?
Yeah, KP1077, that's serdexmethylphenidate. They're looking at it for idiopathic hypersomnia IH. The top-line phase 2 data they released sounded positive.
Okay.
Said it was generally well-tolerated, showed clinically meaningful improvements in things like, excessive sleepiness, sleep inertia, the grogginess waking up, and even brain fog, and side effects.
The common ones were things like insomnia, headache, anxiety, nausea, less appetite, but they said these were generally mild.
So, encouraging results. What's next for KP1077? Phase 3.
That's the plan. They want to have an end-of-phase 2 meeting with the FDA to talk about the phase 3 design, but interestingly, they also said they're exploring strategic alternatives for it.
Strategic alternatives. That usually means looking for a partner or maybe even selling it?
Could mean either, yeah. Suggests they might not want to fund the whole phase 3 and commercialization effort themselves. They also have an IND open for it in narcolepsy and finished a phase 1 for that.
How does it stack up against existing IH treatments? There's competition there, right?
There is. Jazz Pharma's XYWAV is the main one. Zevra thinks KP1077 might offer more flexible dosing, and potentially potentially lower abuse risk.
Because it's a different schedule drug.
Right. It's a Schedule 4 controlled substance, whereas traditional methylphenidate is Schedule 2, which implies a higher abuse potential. So that could be a differentiator if it holds up.
Okay, interesting angle. What about the other big pipeline drug, Celiprolol for VEDS?
Celiprolol, yeah. That's in the Phase 3 Discover trial for vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. That trial's running under an SPA with the FDA, a special protocol assessment.
Which means the FDA has already agreed on the trial design, basically.
Pretty much. Gives them more certainty on the regulatory path if the results are good. Enrollment's ongoing. They had 32 patients signed up by the end of Q1, adding 5 in the quarter. Target is 150 total.
In VEDS. There aren't any approved treatments in the U.S. now, are there?
None. That's why Celiprolol has orphan drug status and breakthrough therapy designation from the FDA. It's a really serious condition with a huge unmet need.
Definitely one to watch then. What about other R&D? Anything else cooking?
They did out-license some preclinical thing recently. Small money up front, potential for more later. But the bigger picture is that strategic shift they made back in December 24.
Right, you mentioned that. Closing labs.
Yeah, shutting down their own discovery labs, planning to outsource the really early stage stuff. It's a clear signal they're putting all their chips on the late stage assets and the commercial products now.
Makes sense, focusing resources. Okay, so we've covered the products, the pipeline, the financials. Let's pull it together for potential investors. What are the main positives you see?
Well, number one has to be the Q1 performance. Strong revenue, better bottom line, driven by that MIPLYFFA launch, which looks, pretty successful out of the gate.
Right. Good initial uptake.
Then there's the cash. That PRV sale gives them that runway to 2029, takes a lot of financial pressure off. That's huge.
Yeah, that's a game changer.
Plus, the potential for MIPLYFFA in Europe is still untapped. Celiprolol for VEDS, if that Phase 3 works, addresses a major unmet need. Analyst sentiment seems pretty positive, suggesting potential upside. And just strategically, focusing on rare diseases can be attractive. Less competition sometimes, stronger pricing, regulatory advantages like orphan drug status. Oh, and the proxy advisors all backed the current board recently, which suggests support for their strategy.
Okay, quite a few check marks on the positive side.
Yeah.
But investing always has risks. What are the key worries or negative points here?
Top of the list has to be OLPRUVA. It's just not performing. Low revenue, those inventory write-offs. That's a drag.
Definitely a concern.
They also need to keep a lid on costs as they scale up commercially. That's always a challenge. Competition is real in all their markets. NPC, UCD, IH.
Right, they're not alone.
And that strategic alternatives language around KP1077 creates some uncertainty about its future. Plus, they've lost money historically. They need to prove they can get to sustained profits.
And potential dilution from warrants.
Yeah, that's something to keep an eye on, too.
Right.
Existing warrants could mean more shares out there down the line. Really, it all boils down to execution, doesn't it? Can they deliver on the commercial side and in the clinic?
It usually does.
Yeah.
So looking forward, what are the key things listeners should watch for? The milestones.
Okay, definitely keep watching the quarterly MIPLYFFA sales in the U.S. Is that momentum continuing?
Right.
Any sign of life for OLPRUVA revenue, that's critical. Then the big one is the MIPLYFFA EU filing, hopefully in the second half of this year, and how the EMA review goes.
Okay.
Keep an eye on enrollment numbers for the Celiprolol Phase 3 trial. Any news on what they decide to do with KP1077 partnership, sale, go it alone. The shareholder meeting outcome on May 29th, given the proxy contest, is relevant. And ultimately, are they tracking towards profitability like analysts expect for maybe 2025 or 2026?
And that Holzer and Holzer investigation mentioned.
Yeah, just monitor if anything comes of that. Standard practice to keep tabs on any legal overhangs.
Okay, lots to track. So if we were to sum up Zevra for our listeners, what's the bottom line?
I'd say Zevra is really at a crossroads, but maybe a positive one. They've shown real progress with MIPLYFFA launching well, and the finances getting a huge boost from the PRV sale.
Right.
That gives them a much stronger foundation. But yeah, there's still big question marks. OLPRUVA needs to get going. Competition is stiff. They need to execute flawlessly, really.
So the potential is there, driven by MIPLYFFA in the pipeline, but the risks, especially around OLPRUVA and just general execution, are real too.
That sums it up pretty well. It's about balancing that strong start for MIPLYFFA and the pipeline promise against the ongoing challenges.
All right, a final thought then for you, our listeners, to chew on. How does Zevra's focus on these difficult, rare diseases fit your own investment approach? Especially thinking about the high rewards if they succeed, but also the very real risks and the need for them to really nail the commercial execution moving forward.
Yeah, that's the core question, isn't it? Risk versus reward in biotech, especially rare disease.
Exactly. Okay, that wraps up our deep dive on Zevra Therapeutics. As always, do your own homework before making any investment choices.
Absolutely.
If you found this helpful, please subscribe to StockExplorers, maybe give us a like, and hit that notification bell so you catch our next exploration. Thanks for tuning in.